I would answer it. Shall we hide his notes?
There you go, Scott.
I'm ready to go. Ready to go?
Sure. You got?
I've got two. Ready? Stand away. I'm expecting a football team to come out of that tunnel.
Let's go. Shoot.
Conference, can I welcome you back after lunch? Please join me in welcoming Michael Shanks MP, Shadow Minister for Scotland, our newly elected Member of Parliament, following our sensational victory in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. To the rostrum.
Conference, good afternoon. I could not be more proud to stand here today as the Scottish Labour Member of Parliament for Rutherglen and Hamilton West. And friends, I want to take this opportunity to pass on my heartfelt thanks to everyone in this room who made that victory possible, to the phenomenal Scottish Labour Party staff, and to the thousands of volunteers and members of trade unions who came to Rutherglen to be part of this historic campaign. Thank you. We demonstrated in that by-election that together we can achieve change. And I say thank you also to Keir Starmer and Anas Sarwar, who together have changed our party to once again be in a position to win elections and to serve the people of this country. We spent 6 months on that by-election. It feels like a lifetime ago. Half a year of pounding pavement, speaking to tens of thousands of voters, listening to them, to their fears, to their hopes, to their challenges, to their aspirations. And I say to everybody here, after all those years, the all-important words Labour gain are words that are worth the effort and are back in our vocabulary again. And what a year it has been since we last met. Just weeks after our last conference, Nicola Sturgeon resigned as the First Minister and Humza Yousaf crawled across the finish line in their leadership contest. Who knew a year ago that we would be talking about camper vans and deleted WhatsApp messages and parliamentary iPads being used to watch football games in Morocco? And who knew that this time last year, Ian Murray would have someone to share an office with at Westminster? I'm delighted that in that year we've doubled the size of the Scottish Parliamentary Labour Party, and I think on behalf of both of us, we're looking forward to some of these amazing parliamentary candidates being elected so we can spend a little bit less time together. But what we do know is that this time last year, people up and down this country were struggling. They were struggling with the rising cost of living, struggling to stretch that pay packet a little bit further month after month, struggling with two governments hopelessly distracted and divided. And friends, for our movement, motivated always by changing people's lives for the better, it's heartbreaking that a year has passed and things have only got more difficult. When people talked about Rutherglen as a seismic moment in Scottish politics, in some ways they were right. But in other ways, it was the natural next step for a country that's run out of patience with two governments that are simply not up to the job. And on doorsteps in that by-election, Anas and I met countless people who had given up on any hope that things would get better, given up on any hope they would get an NHS appointment. We met a woman who had to give up, who told us about her son who had to give up an apprenticeship because he couldn't get the medical care he needed. Another woman who spent her entire life savings on an operation that she'd waited 2 years for and still had no expectation of it happening. A mother who spoke at length of the pain her daughter was going through because she couldn't get the mental health treatment she needed, who was unable to go to school and her education was suffering because of it. And these stories have impact because we all know someone here in a similar situation. We all know of rising child poverty and destitution because we see it in our own communities. Hope is in short supply right now. It's hardly surprising when it's so difficult to see government doing anything to make our lives better. Our public services are creaking, our economy is flatlining. And that's why it's so important we talk about the change Scotland needs. When Anas became leader of this party, he promised to win back the trust of the people of Scotland. With rising injustice, inequality, and division, Anas said, "I'm sorry, we haven't been good enough." And alongside Keir Starmer, he took on the project to rebuild trust in our party, putting us back in the service of working people. So when people talk about polls showing Labour neck and neck with the SNP in Scotland, let's not forget for a second how far we had to come to get to that place. It's a profound shift in public opinion. We've had to come back from the wilderness of Scottish politics, and we've done it far faster than anyone could possibly have predicted. And that wasn't by accident. I think I probably spent more time with Anas Sarwar last year than anybody. It certainly felt like it for both of us. He connects with people immediately. Anyone who's ever chapped a door with Anas knows this. And I'm still finishing some of the jobs that he volunteered me for during the by-election. It would start a conversation. It would end up me painting the whole of a garden fence while he stood by smiling. But people genuinely listen to him because he listens to them. A leader focused on their priorities because he spent time trying to understand the challenges they face. And that's a profound contrast. A contrast between a leader who's too feeble to sack a health secretary that's so glaringly unfit to continue holding office, and another leader making jokes at the expense of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. One leader who spends all his time blaming others and takes no responsibility for passing on crippling cuts to local government, and another burying his head in the sand as the country slides into recession. We need a change from both these leaders. The temptation is for a country to think that politics is fundamentally broken, to resign ourselves to the idea that things can't get better, that this is as good as it gets. But if Rutherglen and Hamilton West was the moment to demonstrate that change is possible, then this year, 2024, is the year that we must all, in all of our communities, get out there and put that into practice everywhere in Scotland. Because people cannot afford another day of this Tory government. And Scotland can't afford to continue regressing in every single measure under the SNP. People need a Labour government on their side again. And conference, I genuinely believe, and I hope all of you do too, that our best days do lie ahead of us. With optimism, things can get better. We can have hope that politics can once again be in the service of people, fighting for our communities, fighting to deliver the change that Scotland needs. And in Anas Sarwar, we have a leader who is absolutely up to that fight, who knows what this country needs and is relentlessly focused on delivering it. And hard work lies ahead. Nothing is certain. Polls will narrow. We're going to have some tough weeks. We'll rightly be challenged on our policies and we'll be held to account for the higher standard that we want to see in politics. Getting our party ready to govern will mean sacrifices. We won't be able to do everything we would like to do because the perilous state of the finances the Tories are leaving us with. And the Tories and the SNP are going to throw everything they've got at us and our campaign because they know this is the last chance they've got. But we're ready. Our fantastic candidates in every part of this country will take the fight, confident in our mission because we've already come so far as a party. Under Anas's leadership, we're back on the pitch. We're ready to fight for the future of Scotland, ready to stand up for the soul of our communities. We've been through a hard slog. Some of us have got the scars to prove it. But together, as one team, with our eye constantly fixed on the goal of building a better Scotland, we can deliver the change Scotland needs. Rutherglen was just the start. We aren't done yet, and Scotland is crying out for more. So together, we will give Scotland its future back. Conference, in a moment, we'll hear from Anas himself, but first, a short film.
The last year has seen Scottish politics and our party transformed, but our work is not done yet, nowhere near done. In fact, this is just the start. So let's take our positive message of how we will work to deliver for working people, for every community across our country. Because now there is no doubt, there is only one party that will make every corner of our country flourish.
Bloody the SNP!
I agree. There is now only one party that is the party of change in Scotland, and that is Scottish Labour.
Conference, please welcome the leader that Scotland needs to deliver the change that Scotland needs, Anas Sarwar.
Today, unstoppable today, unstoppable today, unstoppable today, I'm unstoppable today. Break down, only alone I will cry out now. You'll never see what's hiding out deep down. Yeah, yeah. I know I've heard that they let you feel sure.
Conference, thank you. Wow. Thank you for that welcome. And thank you, Michael, and thank you, Conference. Conference, what a year it has been since we last met. And my, has Scottish politics changed. Scottish Labour back on the pitch and winning again. Conference, we have restored hope to our politics and demonstrated that change is possible. And what a moment it was for our party when last October, in a parliamentary by-election, we recorded a swing of more than 20 points to Labour, and we beat the SNP. The people of Rutherglen and Hamilton West elected Michael Shanks as their Member of Parliament. And thank you, Michael. You'll now be joined by 2 new Labour MPs after the epic by-election victories yesterday. And thank you to everyone here who campaigned for Scottish Labour in Michael's by-election. But guess what? The job isn't over. Far from it. It's only starting. Because this year, we face the most important general election in a generation. So whether you deliver our message of change by knocking on doors, on the phones, by delivering leaflets, or simply by talking to your friends, family, and colleagues, everyone in this room can make the difference. Because, Conference, I want to take you back. Remember that feeling that night of the Rutherglen by-election? Remember that feeling when you heard Labour had won? Remember the goosebumps you felt going up your arm? I still feel them today. Now imagine the night of the next general election, and you watch the news coming through that Scottish Labour MP after Scottish Labour MP is being elected in seat after seat across Scotland. And just imagine that feeling, watching the electoral map turning red. And imagine how you'll feel when you hear the news that the Tories have lost and that Labour has won, and that a Labour Prime Minister will enter 10 Downing Street. Imagine that feeling. That's what we're fighting for. That's the change our country so desperately needs. Because this is the opportunity ahead of us this year.
our opportunity to reject the politics of division and despair, our opportunity to restore integrity, trust and hope in our politics, our chance to elect a Labour government and to put Scotland at the heart of that government. And that chance, that opportunity to change our country for the better. My friends, it's wonderful to be back in my home city of Glasgow this year. I'm a proud son of Glasgow, and I'm proud to call it my home. So much of what has shaped my politics is because of this great city. It is this great city that accepted my family as one of their own, and that welcomes families from wherever they come from. And my family is with me here today, including my 3 boys. Adam and Sefi have heard me speak before, but actually it's my youngest son's first time. So conference, can I ask you to welcome Alian Sarwar, age 7, first-time delegate to Scottish Labour Conference. Now, Alian normally struggles to listen to me for more than 5 minutes. So I was going to let him bring his iPad today, but I wasn't sure about the Wi-Fi signal and I didn't want to risk the roaming charges. Conference, Glasgow is the city where I'm proud to be bringing up my children. This is a city that is brimming with potential. But let's be honest, it's a city being badly mismanaged by the SNP. Just yesterday, SNP and Green councillors in this city agreed another round of cuts in their budget after being shortchanged yet again by their party colleagues in Holyrood. And over the coming weeks, councillors across Scotland are going to have to make similar devastating decisions. And while Labour will continue to campaign with our trade union partners to win more funding from national government, I think it's important to recognise where the blame lies. Because unlike other parties, I won't blame any councillor, actually from any party, who is forced to make cuts in their communities. None of these councillors, whether they are Labour, SNP or from any other political party, chose to come into politics to oversee the managed decline of their towns or their cities. The blame for this lies squarely in one place alone, and that lies with the SNP government in Edinburgh. Scottish Labour remains committed to a fair funding deal for our local communities. It should be the case that when the Scottish Government's budget goes up, the budgets for local communities go up too. That means fair funding for local councils, fair funding for our communities, so that great cities like Glasgow and communities across Scotland can create more jobs, attract more investment and reach their full potential. So conference, it's time to end the centralisation in Holyrood, to push power back out and into the hands of our local communities, because that's what change means and that's why change matters. At conference, let me tell you something else about Glasgow. This city has always stood in solidarity against division, intolerance and injustice. 2 years ago, when we last met at our party conference in Glasgow, we showed our support for Ukraine following Russia's invasion. We demonstrated our solidarity then, and we do so once again today with the people of Ukraine. And this year, tragically, there is also escalating conflict in the Middle East. The loss of innocent life in Israel and in Gaza is an absolute travesty. On October the 7th, we saw the largest loss of Jewish life in any single day since the Holocaust. It was unimaginable, unforgivable, and unjustifiable. And we were right to show our solidarity with the Jewish people and with the people of Israel in the face of that terror. And as I have been clear, the collective punishment of 2.2 million citizens of Gaza is not and can never be a justifiable response to the horror inflicted by Hamas. So today, I once again say loudly and clearly, the fighting must stop right now. That means an immediate ceasefire with an end to rocket fire going into and coming out of Gaza. It means the immediate release of hostages, immediate access to humanitarian aid that includes essential supplies like water, electricity, medicine, food getting into Gaza, and crucially, immediate efforts by world leaders to forge a path to an enduring peace and to a two-state solution. Conference, I've visited the Gaza Strip 15 years ago, and I've actually been to the Al-Shifa hospital. And what I saw there has stayed with me every day since. Incubator parts were not being allowed in for babies. Kidney dialysis machines had been switched off because there wasn't enough fuel. Essential medicines were not available. Al-Shifa was barely a functioning hospital then. Now it is nothing but a camp for thousands of destitute civilians cut off from aid. This has been a collective failure of the global community to strive for peace, leading to this humanitarian catastrophe. And in the face of such devastation, we must hold firm to the two-state solution. Because only when we have a safe, secure state of Israel, side by side with a state of Palestine that is also safe and secure, will we have a long-term peace. And let's be clear, Palestinian statehood is not the gift of a neighbour, it is the right of the Palestinian people. Conference, we must separate Hamas from the Palestinian people. They have no interest in peace and are a terrorist organisation. And we must also separate from the Israeli people Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right government, because he is not interested in peace either. The people of Palestine and the people of Israel are desperate for peace, but they're being failed by bad faith actors on both sides and by the international community. And that is why, as distant as it may feel, we must keep on the light for peace. Because ultimately, only when every life is treated as equal will we see the lasting peace that the people of Palestine and the people of Israel so desperately need and so desperately deserve. And friends, it's also important to recognize that whenever there are tensions in the Middle East, it causes increased tensions here at home. We must always have a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. There is never any excuse for discrimination against Jewish people or Muslim people because of the actions of organizations or governments somewhere else in the world. So let the message from this conference be loud and clear. We will always stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish community in the face of anti-Semitism. We will always stand shoulder to shoulder with the Muslim community in the face of Islamophobia. And we will always stand with every community against any form of prejudice and hate, because that is a founding principle of our Labour Party. Conference, I've devoted so much of my time as a politician to tackling the many divisions we see in society. I've worked on a cross-party basis to address those divisions. But frankly, it's made more challenging when some politicians embrace culture wars and seek to divide community from community. Right now, the Tories are embroiled in an internal contest and a fight for the future of their party. And they're pushing further and further to the conspiracy theories and the far-right crankfest. The Tories are so mired in scandal and division and chaos that their MPs are now too busy trying to find a way to save their own skin rather than focusing on the huge challenges facing our country. And while they seek to divide communities from each other, they also seek to divide us between haves and have-nots. They have crashed the economy and put the UK into recession. It's financial mismanagement on a monumental scale. And it means the average mortgage is costing families across Scotland £2,000 more a year. It means energy bills have soared over the last 2 years. And the tragedy is that while we talk a lot about people choosing between heating and eating, it has now become a harsh reality for too many families. Right now, right across our country, we have parents, predominantly mums, skipping meals in order to feed their children. And we have a terrible situation where some families go without heating for days so they can feed their kids. Families who are in work, and despite working all the hours God sends, they are still struggling to make ends meet, to pay their mortgages, to pay their energy bills, and to afford the food prices. And while that is happening, what do the Tories care about? What do they want to talk about? Sending refugees to Rwanda? Encouraging fascist thugs onto our streets? Legitimising hatred towards LGBT communities? Banning tents for the homeless? And so people ask why change matters. Conference, just imagine 5 more years of these Tories. Imagine 5 more years of Jacob Rees-Mogg, of Priti Patel, Lee Anderson, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, and Rishi Sunak. What an unbearable nightmare. So it falls on us, and only us, the Labour Party, to bring back hope for our country. And the sooner we get rid of this entire shower of Tories, the better. That's why we need change, and that's why change matters. The Conference, a Labour government won't just end the circus, we will end Tory corruption. No more VIP fast lanes or kickbacks for friends. No more dodgy deals for their pals like Michelle Mone. Labour will appoint a COVID corruption commissioner to return what was stolen from the taxpayer and put it back into our public services. So to those that used the pandemic to get rich quick, it's payback time. We will get our money back. And Conference, weak and incompetent leadership, financial mismanagement, no idea how to govern, pitting voter against voter, mired in scandal, breaking public services, a track record of failure in government. It's not just the Tories we're talking about. It's also the perfect description of the SNP. Because you see, the SNP and the Tories are now the very best of frenemies. They use each other as an excuse and a cover for their own failings, and they both seek to divide us. Now, I think it's pretty fair to say things haven't been going too well for the SNP since we met a year ago. With all the chaos and infighting, just imagine what they're saying to each other on WhatsApp. Well, I guess we'll never know. Conference, it may be funny, but it's actually really serious. If ever there was an example of a party losing its way, it's the SNP. A party no longer trusted by the people of Scotland. Back in 2021, I think people were willing to give the First Minister at the time the benefit of the doubt. They put their trust in her because they thought she was doing her best to lead us through the COVID crisis. And they believed her when she promised that this Parliament would be about COVID recovery. But when you see the industrial-scale deletion of evidence to the COVID inquiry, the failure to prioritise COVID recovery in Holyrood, the attempts to subvert not just the inquiry, but to break the law when it comes to freedom of information, and the public being lied to, and when you see the utter despair felt by the COVID-bereaved families as a result, it shows why we need change in Scotland too. A pervasive culture of secrecy and cover-up that has become the hallmark of this SNP government. You see it with the COVID inquiry, with the ferry scandal, and more. It means journalists and the public get lied to. It means politicians and Parliament don't get told the truth. It means the COVID bereaved don't get the answers they deserve. And in the harshest of circumstances, it means parents don't be told the truth what happened to their children when they died. A campaign that's really close to my heart is the fight to uncover the truth about the infection scandal at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital here in Glasgow. I've spent a lot of my time talking directly to the families impacted, in particular to the mother of Millie Mayne, Kimberly Darroch, one of the bravest people I have ever met. Millie was just 10 years old when she died after contracting an infection in hospital. She was in remission with her whole life ahead of her before it was cruelly taken away. So I pay tribute to Kimberly. She's determined to get justice for Millie so that no other family has to suffer like they did. And 7 years on, inch by inch, Millie's family are getting closer to justice. A criminal investigation is now finally underway. But just imagine if Millie's family and other families across Scotland didn't have to fight the system at every turn to get the truth. Just imagine that rather than putting barrier after barrier up in front of her, we had a government on the side of victims. Because I will never, never stop fighting for justice for Millie and all those who lost their lives while their families face institutional cover-up, denial and lies. And conference, yes, that's another reason why change matters. The SNP's distractions, the culture of secrecy, these have real-life consequences. It means we have a government no longer focused on the people's priorities. Financial mismanagement during a cost of living crisis, incompetence and broken public services, and no idea how to grow our economy and create well-paid, secured jobs. People can see the consequences for themselves. Whether you're stuck on an NHS waiting list, struggling to put food on the table, or your children aren't getting the opportunities they need, or your family member can't access a social care package, everyone can see what's wrong with our country. And we have the ludicrous situation where we now have a government that believes if you earn £28,500 in this country, that somehow you have the broadest shoulders and you should be expected to pay more and get less in return. The SNP is being reckless with your money, and Scots shouldn't be forced to pay the price for their incompetence. Because people work hard, pay their taxes, and expect government to be responsible with their money. It shouldn't be too much to ask. What they don't expect is delayed ferries that have gone £300 million over budget to have painted on windows so that ministers can hold a photo call. They don't expect millions to be spent on projects that never materialise, and they don't expect politicians to rack up £11,000 of roaming charges and charge it to the public purse. So we will end the culture of financial mismanagement, we will end the secrecy, and we will finally open the books to public scrutiny to restore people's trust in our politics. We will be responsible with every penny of public money. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. But, Conference, you now have the bizarre situation where the leader of the Scottish National Party is claiming that Scots don't matter in this year's election. Now, you might have missed that because I accept it's hard to keep track of their strategy. So I'll have a go. Now, please bear with me. First, it was the general election will be a de facto referendum. Then they scrapped the de facto referendum. Then it was back on the table. Then it was a majority of votes. Then it was a majority of seats. Then it was the most seats. Then they said there's no difference between Labour and the Tories. Then they admitted there's a world of a difference between Labour and the Tories. And now they're back to saying there's no difference again. Before they said don't vote Labour because they can't win in England. Now they're saying don't vote Labour because they can't lose in England, so your vote doesn't matter. Confused, Conference. I was confused even writing this bit. But let me tell you, you're not as confused as they are. Because, Conference, every Scot matters. Every Scottish family matters. Every Scottish vote matters. Scotland matters. And by voting Scottish Labour, Scotland will be at the heart of the next UK Labour government. Now, Scotland has long been suspicious of the Tories. We've seen the damage they do to our communities here, but they also have a lasting legacy of damage in communities across the UK. And that is why we are united across the UK in wanting to get rid of this morally bankrupt Tory government. So Scotland's got a choice. The SNP wants Scotland to settle for sending a message. Well, I have more ambition for Scotland. The Labour Party has more ambition for Scotland. The people of Scotland have more ambition. There should be no limit to our ambition. So this year, yes, let's put the Tories out of Downing Street, but more than that, let's put Scotland at the heart of government, be ambitious for Scotland and change our country for the better. Conference, Scotland has always been an outward-looking nation, and I want that to be the case again. Over the last 3 years, I have been clear that I will not turn my back on any voter. I will not close my eyes or shut my ears. So I say directly to people, I don't care how you voted in the past. I don't care how you voted in either referendum. I don't support independence, and I don't support a referendum. But I understand why people want to run a million miles away from this rotten Tory government. So while we may disagree on the final destination for Scotland, I believe we can all agree we need change right now. So let's go on this part of the journey together and deliver that change and get rid of this rotten Tory government, so we can tackle the cost of living crisis, so we can get Scotland's economy back on track and put money back into your pocket, so we can deliver economic growth for every part of our country, and so we can clean up our politics, end the corruption, and so we can improve workers' rights in Scotland, so we can cut household bills and deliver energy security, so we can reform and invest in our NHS, and so we can finally boot out this corrupt, immoral Tory government. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. This May, we will mark 25 years of our Scottish Parliament. Conference, a Labour government will be an opportunity to reset devolution and take it back to its founding principles. Because a quarter of a century on from when our Parliament was created, our opponents have failed to make devolution work for the people of Scotland. Devolution was never meant to be about two governments fighting with each other. Devolution was always meant to be about Scottish solutions to Scottish problems and two governments working together when in our national interest to actually deliver for Scotland. And neither was devolution meant to be about centralising power away from our communities. It was meant to be about empowering our communities. So ask people in the Western Isles, in Inverness or in Orkney, if they think devolution has moved power closer to them. For them and so many other places, Holyrood can feel as distant as Westminster. Every layer of our democracy is broken. That's why we must replace the House of Lords with a democratic institution that represents the nations and regions of the UK. It's why we must clean up Westminster and push power out to the nations and regions. But let's not pretend that we don't have to clean up Holyrood too. We do. We have to end the culture of secrecy and cover-up, stop wasting public money, push power out and empower communities across our country and right across Scotland. And again, that's what change means, and that's why change matters. But conference is not enough for us just to persuade people across the country that Scotland's two failing governments deserve to lose. We have to persuade people that Labour deserves to win. And that's why we've got to get out there and not just tell people what's wrong in this country, even though that list is long. People can see that for themselves. We have to listen to them, give them hope, and demonstrate that change is possible. The first opportunity for change is the general election. And when you look at the charlatans that we've had as Prime Minister in recent years, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, we need a Prime Minister of decency and integrity. Someone who fundamentally believes in public services and public service and politics being a force for good. That's why we need a UK Labour government led by Keir Starmer. I know how hard Keir has worked to rebuild our party since the defeat in 2019. That has been an important job, but it's not our defining mission. Our mission is far bigger than party. Our mission is about what we do for the country after winning back the trust of the British people. We are rebuilding our party for a purpose so that we can return to government and rebuild our country. Now, I often get asked, why do you do this? Well, let me tell you. When I was growing up, I genuinely believed that a better future was ahead for our country. And now that I'm a father, I want, like every other parent, a better future for my children. But for the first time in generations, I worry that people today are fearful for the future, that there'll be fewer opportunities rather than more, that somehow this is as good as it gets, and that we just have to accept mediocrity. Well, I'm not willing to accept that. I'm not willing to accept managed decline. We have to give back hope to everyone in this country, hope that we can deliver that positive change for the next generation. A belief that Scotland's best days do lie ahead of us. That's my mission, that's our mission, that's the Labour Party's mission, that's what change means, and that's why change matters. And conference, let me give you a few examples. Across Scotland today, there are 410,000 adults in in-work poverty. More than 109,000 people in Scotland are on a 0 hours contract. So we must finally bring the world of work into the 21st century, strengthening workers' rights and strengthening our economy too. Instead of allowing a race to the bottom, we will deliver a race to the top. We will end the low-wage, low investment and low productivity cycle that our country has been trapped in for the last decade. That's why a Labour government will deliver Angela Rayner's New Deal for working people and make work pay, a new deal designed in partnership with our trade unions. It will be the centrepiece of Labour's programme for government, and it will be the most transformative change for working people in a generation. Conference, we will make work pay again, not hit working people in the middle of a cost of living crisis. That will increase people's pay packets, lift people out of poverty, put more money into our economy, and increase tax revenues for schools and hospitals. And our new deal will strengthen the protections afforded to all workers. That means ending the scandal of fire and rehire, extending employment rights from day one, delivering a real living wage, and banning exploitative 0 hour contracts once and for all. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. Scotland's education system used to be world-renowned, but as the international results show, standards have been falling for years. 1 in 4 children and young people who are on a mental health waiting list are also still waiting too long for treatment. And right now, 24% of children in Scotland are living in poverty. 250,000 children. Defeating poverty has and always will be a defining mission of the Labour Party. It's in our DNA. And the last Labour government lifted 1 million children out of poverty across the UK, and we can do it again. The next Labour government will make sure there is a proper safety net for those who need it. And Scottish Labour will deliver a dedicated mental health worker in every GP surgery so that young people can access the help they need before it becomes a crisis. We are committed. We are committed to transforming our skills system so that our young people are ready for the jobs of the future. Because no child's future should be defined by their background. Making work pay, breaking down barriers, and giving every young person the opportunity they deserve. That's how you lift families out of poverty and give young people hope back. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. And today, 1/3 of Scottish households are living in fuel poverty. Energy bills are almost 60% higher than 2 years ago. Labour will deliver cheaper, clean energy and improve the efficiency of our homes, saving households hundreds of pounds off their annual fuel bills. The energy giants recorded profits of £33 billion last year. That's why Labour will introduce a windfall tax to tackle the cost of living crisis. And yet, just yesterday, the same day that an energy giant announced a tenfold increase in their profits, the SNP now oppose Labour's plans for a windfall tax. The SNP now believe if you earn £28,500, you should pay more tax, but if you're an energy giant earning billions in profit, you should pay less tax. They can no longer pretend to be on the side of working people in Scotland. Now, let me be clear. Oil and gas play a major role in the energy mix for decades to come. There will be no turning off the taps, but we will also accelerate the transition to net zero. We will upgrade the UK energy grid, invest in Scotland's ports, capitalise on new technologies, and use Labour's British jobs bonus to create quality supply chain jobs right here in Scotland. We will make our country the winner in the race for the next generation of clean energy jobs and cheaper energy bills, not sell our seabed off on the cheap. And we will support new technology, attract inward global investment, and deliver 50,000 high-skilled, well-paid jobs, all backed by a publicly owned energy generation company, GB Energy, that will be headquartered right here in Scotland. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. And let me give you an example from this week. On Monday, I visited the Port of Dundee. It was incredible to see the work underway to assemble offshore wind turbines that will help us reach net zero and bring down energy bills. But you know, the tragedy is this. Nearly every single component on those turbines was imported from abroad. Just imagine if those supply chain jobs were here in Scotland. Good, high-skilled, high-paid jobs. Scottish wind turbines built in Scotland, not Indonesia. Bridges built with British steel, not Chinese steel. And ferries built in the great shipyards on the Clyde, not Turkey and Poland. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. And it's not just the energy sector that economic opportunities are being squandered. Between 2022 and 2023, the number of businesses in Scotland fell by 20,000. That's livelihoods lost and futures ruined. The current government has no idea how to grow our economy while other nations and regions power ahead. So over the course of this year, in the build-up to the 2026 election, we are starting to set out what change will look like with a Labour government in the Scottish Parliament. And as we mark the 25th anniversary of devolution, it's also a time to reflect on what our Scottish Parliament has achieved and where it has fallen short. Holyrood has overseen sweeping social change, from the smoking ban to same-sex marriage to free personal care. But we have been very much a social policy parliament rather than an economic policy parliament. And that has let down Scottish employers and Scottish workers. This week I published the first report as we build a business case for Scotland. We recognise that business has to be successful for them to create the jobs our people need and for us to build the strong economy our country needs. Now, Labour will always be the best vehicle for delivering social change, but we recognise that social change is only possible with a strong, growing economy. That's why we are an unashamedly pro-growth, pro-business, pro-worker party. In contrast, this SNP government has resorted to using income tax as a substitute for economic growth. That is choking off opportunity and hurting families and companies in the middle of a cost of living crisis and a cost of doing business crisis. It is failing businesses in Scotland. Spurned on, of course, by the anti-growth SNP, the anti-growth Greens, the SNP now too has become an anti-business, anti-aspiration party. That's why we need a new business case for Scotland. Now, I don't pretend that Scottish Labour has all the answers, which is why we've been listening to business leaders and experts across the country. Since being elected leader, I have met with over 1,000 employers in Scotland to hear directly about their concerns and their aspirations. From startups to employee-owned SMEs to cooperatives to our largest corporations. I am determined to break down barriers to business and increase the appeal and the appetite for business to invest and grow in Scotland. Because too often, our politics has focused on what we can't do rather than what we can do. So it's time to use all the economic levers the Scottish Government already has. Our people and skills, maximising the potential of Scotland's workforce with a skills system redesigned so that it is aligned to industry needs. Embracing technology to transform the economy and our public services, embedding it at the heart of the public sector to make it more efficient. Delivering regional development and addressing poor transport infrastructure. And building startup hubs based on the unique expertise of energy in Aberdeen, life sciences and gaming in Dundee, fintech and data in Edinburgh, and advanced manufacturing in Glasgow. We will also declutter the enterprise agency landscape so that business knows where to turn for support. And we will also streamline and improve regulation so that Scotland is open to business. Because from the mishandled deposit return scheme to the never-ending delays in upgrading the A9, there is an environment of uncertainty and risk at the worst possible time. That's why we will work in partnership with business to deliver our economic plan and strive for the UK to have the highest sustained growth in the G7. And we will make sure that growth works for every part of the UK. And conference, we will fix the mess the Tories have made of Brexit. We will reset the relationship with our European neighbours, and we will tear down the unnecessary barriers to trade. Because the Tories have crashed the economy, the SNP don't understand the economy, but it is Labour that will put the economy at the heart of our politics. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. And let me tell you about one area where we've been listening and which comes up time and time again, and it needs reformed, and also why it matters. Businesses want to invest in Scotland and create jobs, but many of them are put off by how long it takes to get anything built. Our country faces a housing emergency. The lack of homes is causing devastation for families and holding back opportunities for young people who dream of owning their own home. And at the same time, Scotland's energy potential and the clean energy of the future is being held back by how long it takes to get a project off the ground. Scotland's planning system is too slow, under-resourced, and is preventing development in our cities and in our rural areas. And that means investment and opportunities are going elsewhere. When you can get an answer to a planning application in 13 weeks in Manchester, why would you wait 75 weeks in Glasgow? So Scottish Labour will speed up our planning system. We will build a central team to help fast-track projects across the country which are identified as drivers of economic growth. Decision-making will always stay local, but councils will be able to draw on this new national resource that offers the expertise, skills and the support needed to get their economies motoring. It will end the long waits and clear the backlogs so that our towns and cities can become the hubs of development and industry. And crucially, it will allow the building of local energy projects and the grid development we need to deliver cheaper, clean energy to families across the country. And it will unlock house building across Scotland and make that dream of home ownership for everyone a reality again. That's what change means. That's why change matters. Now, Scotland has many key assets and strengths, but the government has failed to capitalise on them. The way I think about it, over the last 17 years, the SNP has focused on selling Scotland to the Scots. We don't need to be told how amazing Scotland is. We know that already. Because, as is so often the case, the nationalist ambition for Scotland and our people stops at the border. I want us to sell Scotland to the UK and to the rest of the world. Because we all know that wherever you go in the world, you tell them you're from Scotland, and invariably you get a positive response. Brand Scotland, our amazing food and drink, creative industries, tourism and hospitality has an immense soft power. So let's tap into Brand Scotland, both here and across the globe. Let's capitalise on Scotland's unique identity and increase exports of our phenomenal produce and make Scotland an even more attractive place for investment and create more jobs and opportunity at home. And this sits hand in hand with growing our tourism sector, opening up our airports to more direct international routes and addressing the problems with visitor visas for artists and sports people. Promoting Brand Scotland beyond our own borders requires being more ambitious for our country. And Labour will bring that ambition using the Scotland Office and UK embassies to promote Brand Scotland on a global stage. And the Scotland Office will be Scotland's window to the world, working to promote Scottish produce internationally and drive inward investment. And conference, let me tell you what a difference it will make for the Scotland Office to be promoting Scotland on the global stage when it is led by a Secretary of State for Scotland, our very own Ian Murray, who will always put Scotland's interests first. That's what change means. That's why change matters. So, conference, that's why our first priority has to be getting growth back into our economy. It's what makes it possible to change our public services, which we are so passionate about. Because every single institution has been left weaker than it was 17 years ago. A civil service forced to waste time on picking fights. Emergency staff not given the equipment or the time they need to do their jobs properly. Police officers forced to spend so much time responding to mental health calls that their own mental health is suffering and that they can't even investigate crimes anymore. Teachers forced to bring their own supplies to the classroom and to deal with increasing violence in our schools. And nowhere is change more needed than in our National Health Service. Today, there are 830,000 of our fellow Scots on an NHS waiting list, waiting for appointments, diagnostics and treatment. That is the equivalent of almost 1 in 6 Scots. Now, every single person in this room will know someone waiting for a test or waiting for treatment. And as a former NHS dentist, I look on with despair at how this government has ruined our health service. The NHS, Labour's greatest ever achievement, has been broken. So it falls to us once again to fix it. And there is nobody more determined to rebuild our NHS than our Deputy Leader, the brilliant Jackie Bailey. So, conference, let's hear it for Jackie. I know what you're thinking, she's always so naturally modest, that dame. To fix our health service, we will embrace digital innovation in the NHS, ending the archaic use of written prescriptions, delivering faster diagnosis, and making it easier to make a GP appointment. And we will empower clinicians, ensuring their voices are not silenced by health board bureaucrats. We will reduce the number of health boards to 3, freeing up funds to invest in the NHS workforce and in hospitals. That means fewer managers, fewer CEOs, and more doctors and more nurses. And we will put fairness back at the heart of everything we do. That is why a UK Labour government will scrap the non-dom tax loophole, and we will invest the money in more nurses and more consultants in our NHS. Because, conference, right now, waiting times in Scotland are at a record high. Closing the non-dom tax loophole will deliver £134 million in Barnett funding for Scotland every year. So today, I commit a future Scottish Labour government to investing every penny of that in our NHS to increase capacity and drive down waiting lists. That will deliver the equivalent of 160,000 more NHS appointments every single year. That's what change means, and that's why change matters. And, conference, what makes our party different from our opponents is that we don't aspire to power for our own aims. For us, it's about changing the lives of working people. Because part of the privilege of politics is that every day I get to meet people who are passionate about the future, in workplaces, schools, and in our communities. And if you ask people what matters most to them, you can't help but be struck by the passion and talent in every part of our country. Yet people's frustration and anger has grown. They feel like nothing works, that the promise has been broken, that if they work hard, things will get better for them and their families. Because in almost every community, you meet someone who has seen someone a loved one pay a fortune to go private because they can't bear to see a relative waiting pain on an NHS waiting list. A parent worried about their children's future. A mother skipping meals as her bills skyrocket. People buying less and less at the supermarket as food prices outstrip their wages. They demand change. Our challenge is to give people hope, to prove to them that this isn't as good as it gets, that a Labour government can deliver not just the change Scotland needs, but deliver on people's aspirations and dreams. Because, conference, our opponents don't want change. They are now the parties of the status quo. Scottish Labour is now the only party of change in our country. So to those who ask, what does change mean? Why does change matter? And why vote Scottish Labour? I say this. Yes, the coming election is an opportunity to get rid of this rotten Tory government and an opportunity to tell the SNP that we've had enough of them failing Scotland and its people. but it's more than that. It's an opportunity to change our country. So if you want to grow our economy and create more jobs, vote Scottish Labour. If you want to deliver a new deal for working people and make work pay, vote Scottish Labour. If you want a commitment to tackle child poverty, vote Scottish Labour. If you want to scrap the non-dom tax loophole and invest in our NHS to reduce waiting times, vote Scottish Labour. If you want GB Energy, headquartered right here in Scotland, and cheaper energy bills, vote Scottish Labour. If you want to end the housing emergency and bring back the dream of home ownership, vote Scottish Labour. And if you want to restore trust, aspiration and bring hope back into our politics, if you want to kick the Tories out of Downing Street, and if you want Scotland's voice at the heart of the next government, vote Scottish Labour. That's what change means. That's why change matters. Let's go make that change happen. Thank you.
I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I put my armor on, I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Break down, only alone I will cry out now. You'll never see what's hiding out deep down. Yeah, I know I've heard that to let your feelings show is the only way to make friendships grow, but I'm too afraid now. Yeah, I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I put my armor on, I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. I'm unstoppable today. I put my armor on, show you how strong I am. I put my armor on, I'll show you that I am. I'm unstoppable. I'm a Porsche with no brakes. I'm invincible. Yeah, I win every single game. I'm so powerful. I don't need batteries to play. I'm so confident. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Unstoppable today. Yeah, I'm unstoppable today.
Oh well, that was good.
Yeah, it's just me and you now.
Just you and I. The odd couple. just go.
All right. It was a fantastic speech, but it's up to us to get on and deliver that vision now. So as we reset the hall, we're just going to play this short video on the New Deal for working people that Anas has just told us about.
Working people here in Scotland are crying out for change.
Labour's New Deal for working people will smash the class ceiling, giving everyone the chance to succeed.
You will have a right to protection against unfair dismissal, parental leave and sick pay from day one.
We will ban zero-hour contracts and end fire and rehire.
And will tackle low pay by making sure the national minimum wage is a genuine living wage. Only Labour can boot the Tories out of Downing Street.
And deliver the change that Scotland needs.
There must be a dinner or something at lunchtime. There's quite a few people coming through this door. And I know
That was the business, was it?
it must have been, yeah. 'Cause I noticed that it was quite. You've been here all day?
I'm getting
continue our conversations, politely I would suggest you do it in the hall and we'll just get the session started. So the afternoon debate is on the change we need to deliver for working people. This debate session will follow the same process as this morning if you were here. And as a reminder, copies of the motions to be debated at the conference have been emailed to you and are in the CEC report. So the following motions, during this afternoon's debates, the conference will consider the following motions. Composite 3 on child poverty, submitted by Glasgow Shettleston CLP, Kilmarnock and Elvin CLP and USDAW. Composite motion 4 on the New Deal for working people, submitted by Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley CLP and Glasgow Province CLP. And motion 4 on school meals, submitted by Hamilton, Larkhall and Stenhouse, will be considered as part of an SEC statement, which will be moved by Ben Proctor, who I've seen earlier here, on behalf of the SEC, and seconded by the delegate from Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse CLP, who originally proposed a motion. I will call each motion after one another in the debate, and I invite speakers to be ready for that. So you have 5 minutes to propose and 3 minutes to second. So can I now welcome Paul O'Kane, MSP, Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Social Security and Equalities, to open the debate. Paul. What was there?
Conference, what an honour it is to follow my friend, our leader, the man who embodies the change that Scotland needs. What a speech. And Anas has been clear with all of us in the Shadow Cabinet that change must be at the heart of everything that we do. Because working people across our country have had enough. Enough of inaction, enough of division, and enough of managed decline, and rightly so. They have been hammered for 14 years by a Conservative government that has presided over the largest fall in living standards since modern records began in the 1950s. A Conservative government whose reckless mismanagement of the economy has seen the mortgages and bills of working people spiral out of control, and we now know have plunged us into another recession. A Conservative government whose unfeeling governance has seen the social contract, the social security system, founded by Labour, fall into disrepair, no longer fit for purpose to support the most vulnerable. Well, Conference, let me say once again for those at the back, their time is up. Working people across Scotland and the UK need change, and this year we have the chance to offer people that change. Change in the form of the New Deal for working people, ending fire and rehire, banning zero-hours contracts, introducing rights from day one, and making work pay with a true living wage to end the growing scourge of in-work poverty. Change in the form of fundamental reform of universal credit so that we build a safety net that is fit for purpose and fair in people's hour of need. And change to renew the social contract to help people not just into work, but to help them get on at work. By booting the Tories out of office this year, we can put the country back on a path to a decade of renewal. Conference, it was my honour to stand beside Michael Shanks day after day in the streets of Rutherglen and Hamilton West and help to lead our campaign. And I know how it felt on the early hours of the 6th of October in that counting hall in Hamilton. And I know, Conference, how much we all want to feel like that in every part of Scotland, not for our own sake, but for the sake of our cities, towns and villages, for the change that Labour can make in our communities. The path to that change runs through Scotland, with Scottish Labour MPs at the heart of government, helping to build it, not SNP ones carping from the sidelines, blocking progress. Because Scotland is being let down by not one, but two failing governments. Over 1 million Scots are languishing in poverty, almost half of them in very deep poverty, whilst 1 in 10 are locked in persistent low pay. Under the SNP, People are waiting for over 4 months for Scottish social security payments like adult disability payment, a figure that would make the DWP blush. Those people are crying out for change and support, and we have to give it to them. Because the SNP over the last 17 years have shown that they can't and they won't. There is a lot of long-term work to do to rectify their inaction. But we must recognise that working people need help now as the cost of living crisis continues to bite. For too long, Scots have been waiting for this distracted and divided SNP government to sit up and notice that they've been getting deeper and deeper into debt to stay above water through the cost of living crisis. And debt is starting to bite. Public debt is pulling people into a cycle and trapping them in poverty. So instead of dither and distraction, Scottish Labour will help. We are introducing a comprehensive package of measures which would help people who are in danger of sinking in debt to stay afloat and get the support they need. That will include ensuring debt collection methods are proportionate to people's circumstances and keeping the debt collectors from the door. It will mean that more people are getting breathing space to help them get back on their feet, and it will mean stopping extra charges for people on low incomes trying to pay back what they owe. Because debt isn't a shameful thing. It's been happening to more and more people in the cost of living crisis, and it's not their fault. The fault lies with the economic incompetence of the Tories and the inaction of the SNP. So we will ensure that no one who has been put into the Reds because of them will have to suffer the worry and the stigma problem debt can bring. Beyond dealing with the immediate effects of the mess that the SNP and Conservatives have created, to tackle poverty over the long term, we must grow the economy again. We need growth to provide change for working people, to reform the social security safety net that we know is so important, to ensure that we can properly tackle child poverty, as Labour governments have done in the past. 1 million children lifted out of poverty by the last Labour government. Now, Conference, the Scottish Child Payment is welcome for the support that it has provided, but the SNP claim it as a panacea to solving child poverty, while a quarter of children in Scotland still live in poverty. They have failed to do anything like what is enough to tackle child poverty. And we cannot just tackle the symptoms of poverty and not the root causes of it. That's why Scottish Labour set up its Child Poverty Commission. The Commission is working on a route map to lifting children across Scotland out of poverty, which will be one of the defining missions of a future Scottish Labour government, and I am proud to be working with experts from across Scotland to consider the bold action we will take to end child poverty. Tackling poverty and inequality and its consequences will take a whole of society effort. We have always understood that in the Labour movement, working between government, trade unions, business and our third sector, who already do so much on the front line. I know this well. Before my election to Parliament, I worked for Enable Scotland, and it was the honour of my life to support people who have a learning disability and their family carers to access support, housing and work. Our third sector organisations, so many of them here with us at conference, are having to do more with less to support people in their hour of need. The SNP have promised to overhaul the funding model for the third sector for nearly a decade. Promises they were making when I was starting out in the voluntary sector, and that wasn't yesterday. But they've never materialised. So today, we commit to bringing forward a new deal for the third sector. Scottish Labour are ready to rebuild the relationship between the Scottish Government and our third sector organisations. That means ensuring they have security of funding and flexibility with their time and resources. Our multi-year funding model allows organisations to demonstrate stability and the long-term potential of their services, which will attract additional investment from non-governmental partners. We will agree funding principles that work for both government and the sector to ensure it is laser-focused on reducing poverty and growing the economy. Conference, it is going to take a significant effort to undo the damage to the lives of working people by the Tories and the SNP. But it is a challenge we have to be up for. Only Labour can provide the change we need at the general election to support working people and continue the dual mission of growing the economy and tackling poverty. And we must build the case for a Scottish Labour government in 2026 ready to build social justice across Scotland. So we must harness all the talent and all the tools that we have. A new deal for working people, a new deal for the social contract and social security, a new deal for our third sector. That conference is the change we need. That is the change we choose. That is the change we will deliver. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Paul, and thank you for your leadership in this area. Can I now ask the people moving and seconding composite motion 3, if you could start that process by coming to the rostrum, the mover, and for composite motion 4, if the mover and seconders could be ready. You're very welcome, Tracy.
Hello. Chair, Conference, Tracy Gilbert from Usdaw and Parliamentary Candidate for Edinburgh North and Leith. Thank you.
Right, okay.
Moving the composite motion on ending child poverty and in-work poverty. Conference, today with 17 years of SNP in Holyrood and 14 years as a Tory in Westminster, 1 in 4 of children are living in poverty in Scotland. That's 1 in 4 children going hungry, 1 in 4 children being cold, 1 in 4 children more likely to face lifelong illnesses, and 1 in 4 more children being left behind. The SNP's record on child poverty is a national scandal. It's so bad that Scotland's Children's Commissioner, someone nominated by the SNP government, have stated that they've absolutely failed. Conference, 1 child living in poverty is 1 child too many. We all know that poverty is caused by a whole variety of issues. The link between child poverty and in-work poverty is well established. Evidence shows that 2/3 of children living in poverty are in working households, proving that for so many, work doesn't pay. And just as weak employment rights contribute to poverty, strong employment rights provide families with financial security, giving our children the life chances that they so rightly deserve. Recently, we were joined by Angela Rayner to campaign on Labour's New Deal for working people. While knocking doors in Edinburgh and North and Leith, it was great to see how Labour's New Deal gave people hope. Hope that Labour understands the issues they face. Hope that our policies will provide transformative change in their workplace and for their families. And hope that, unlike the SNP and the Tories, that Labour are listening and that we do care and that we are on their side. Conference, all of us in this room understand the need to elect a Labour government. A government who not only have a proven track record on tackling child poverty, but also who, through working with trade unions and the Child Poverty Commission, understand the size and urgency of the challenges we face, and we have a plan to give our children their future back. As well as delivering better pay, more employment rights and extending access to trade unions, a Labour government will also tackle issues such as the lack of appropriate childcare and excessive childcare costs. Childcare costs remain a huge barrier to parents' ability to access, remain and to succeed in the workplace. And it's not just within early years provision. As children get older, accessing wraparound childcare is crucial in ensuring working parents are not held back. By breaking down these barriers, we can assure that children born into low-income families are not condemned to a life of poverty. Usdaw members are incredibly proud to be able to help shape Labour's strategy to tackle child poverty, whether through the New Deal for Workers, providing childcare that is affordable and accessible to all, to ensuring breakfast clubs in every primary school. Our members know that Labour understands the issues that face them, from providing food and housing security to reducing energy costs and reforming universal credit. Labour gets what working people need because their problems are our problems, their stories are our stories. Ordinary working people, each of us here, shop stewards, councillors, party members, MPs, MSPs, working for our communities, not removed from them, because each of us are Labour. And that is why only our party, the Labour Party, has the solutions to the problems and the policies to match. Conference, there's no room for complacency over the forthcoming election. We must win over every voter, door by door and vote by vote. We know we have the commitment. We know we have the policies. We know the stakes are high, but most importantly, we know why we need to win. Not for any of us here today, but for the people outside this room, for the children in our communities, for the people who have no voice. By addressing the issues they face and by delivering the policies that they need, we can ensure that Labour has the best possible policy platform to win the next election. For these reasons, please support the composite motion. Friends, the time for change is now.
Hello Conference, Lillian Jones, Kilmarnock and Irvine Valley CLP, and also Westminster candidate for Kilmarnock and Loudon. Thank you. Thank you. So, child poverty remains one of the most serious issues facing our society today. 1 in 4 children living in poverty are more likely to have poorer educational, health and social outcomes and live with the effects of living in poverty for a lifetime. Government measures aimed at tackling child poverty are failing. According to the 2023 UNICEF report card, the UK is 37 of 39 OECD and EU countries ranked on an international league table measuring the success to tackle child poverty. Improvements brought in by the last Labour government have been systematically dismantled over a decade of Tory austerity and lack of political will to help those most in need. Universal credit is unfit for purpose. The current prevalence rates and experiences of families living in poverty have likened to the Victorian era by leading anti-poverty experts such as Sir Michael Marmot. Behind these shocking statistics are real children and real families who are struggling to put food on the table, heat their homes and provide warm clothing for winter. We applaud Scottish Labour MSPs for supporting the Scottish Child Payment and for arguing for an increase to £30 per week for eligible children, but it is important that those payments keep pace with inflation so value of the payment is not eroded over time. During the cost of living crisis, the East Ayrshire Labour Group introduced half-price school meals for P6, S6 children not eligible for free meals. This has been a success with an increase of 21% of uptake during the first quarter. Now that's East Ayrshire Labour in opposition. Just think what we could do in power. There is a housing emergency here in Scotland, but the SNP are not listening. Instead, they cut £200 million or 26% from next year's affordable house building programme, meaning thousands of children and families will be trapped in insecure temporary accommodation for longer. Conference, our country needs change, and the Labour Party will deliver the change that we desperately need by investing in housing and building homes for the future across our country. Now, despite the SNP proclamations and promises, they have failed to invest sufficiently to lift more children out of poverty, and at current rates are on course to miss statutory child poverty targets by decades. Conference, it is clear there is urgent work to do to address child poverty in Scotland, and we would welcome the creation of a dedicated Cabinet Secretary post within our Labour MSP group, laying down an absolute marker for our commitment and priority to lifting children out of poverty. Conference, on behalf of Kilmarnock and Irvine Valley CLP, I second the motion, and I hope you can support it too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And we now have the mover of Composite Motion 4 on New Deal for Working People. You're very welcome.
Conference, Elaine Stewart, Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley CLP, East Ayrshire Councillor and proudly Labour's candidate in Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock in the next general election. Conference, it is a privilege to be the Labour candidate, and I, alongside my team, are fighting every day to turn Ayrshire red and to give Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, an area steeped in Labour and trade union history, a Labour MP once again. And Conference, it is an honour to be standing on a commitment to significantly improve workers' rights, pays, terms and conditions. Labour's New Deal for working people is not just a policy on a piece of paper. It is a message to British workers that we are on their side and that we will stand up for them and that we will deliver what is described as the biggest upgrade of worker rights in the next generation. When we say we will make work pay, we mean it. And I am proud to be able to take that message to the doorsteps, and we do every weekend. Conference. Since we met in Edinburgh, the Tories have attacked workers' rights and trade union activity at every opportunity, constantly making life more challenging for those struggling to get by to appease their friends at the top. And indeed, in Scotland, we have seen the SNP use exploitive zero-hours contracts in a by-election because they could not muster up the numbers to run a proper campaign. These are not the parties on the side of people. These are parties who are looking after themselves, protecting their own interests and trying to avoid defeat at all costs. With our new deal for working people, Labour could not be clearer in saying that we are putting country first and people first and party second. Conference. The Tory cost of living crisis is having deep, divisive and devastating impacts on people up and down our country. Those on low pay are seeing their pay packets not afford what it used to. Young people are being exploited in the workplace and are often left in the dark about their next shift. And older people are being asked to work longer before they are in receipt of their state benefit. The sooner we see the back of this economically incompetent government, the better. It is time for a fresh start, time to deliver that new deal, time to rebalance the nation and eradicate that inequality that so badly holds us back. Labour is ready to deliver change on our country's needs, and Conference, make no mistake, in Ayrshire we will fight to be part of that change. Thank you, Conference, and I move Composite Motion 4.
Okay, thank you for that. I understand that one was seconded from the floor. So next we have Ben Proctor to deliver that SEC statement.
Ben Proctor, moving the statement on free school meals on behalf of the Scottish Executive Committee. Conference, it is deeply troubling that in our nation, which should be a beacon of progress and prosperity, 250,000 children are living in conditions of poverty. This is not just a number, it represents young people and young lives deprived of their basic needs, opportunities and the promise of a brighter future. The impact of child poverty extends beyond just the basic needs of food and shelter. It reaches into our classrooms, affecting education, health, well-being and the potential of our children and young people. The cost of living crisis has only magnified those challenges, placing increased pressures on families and pushing them deeper into a cycle of poverty and debt. Scottish Labour is at the forefront of addressing this crisis. We strongly support initiatives such as the Right to Food Bill, championed by Scottish Labour and cooperative MSP Rhoda Grant, aiming to ensure that no child goes to school hungry. The SEC commend the efforts to expand access to free school meals across Scotland and indeed across the UK, recognising that such measures are vital in the fight against holiday hunger and the widening attainment gap. We acknowledge the Food for Thoughts campaign's vision of universal free school meals for all pupils, as championed by the STUC Women's Committee, recognising that this can be a cornerstone of our strategy to combat child poverty. It is a fundamental belief that no child should be held back by hunger. As this proposal falls within the devolved policy areas, the Scottish Executive believes that the motion on free school meals from Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse CLP should be remitted to the Scottish Policy Forum so that it can be considered as part of the policy process for the Holyrood elections in 2026.
Thank you for that, Ben. We now have a CLP member from Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse to second that statement. Thank you.
Chair, Committee and Conference. Councillor Gavin Keat on behalf of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, CLP, and first-time delegate and Speaker. Conference, as a primary school teacher in South Lanarkshire, I had the absolute privilege of working alongside our young people, our talented and inspiring young people and our future generation. And it was a privilege, the light bulb moments when the jigsaw pieces finally fell into place, the collaborative learning, the teamwork, matching the siblings, my wee primary 7 football team from Les Mahago lifting the Highland Games Cup, the joy in their faces and what that meant to them and to their families. Conference, being a teacher is an invaluable opportunity to influence and impact our young people's lives. And I know that for many teachers, they approach that as a vocation as opposed to a job, going above and beyond to make our young people's lives that bit better. And for that, our teachers, support staff, janitors, cleaners and office staff deserve our unfaltering support and thanks, Conference. Conference, whilst teaching truly was a privilege, it was also a front row seat to poverty and its many manifestations. Children falling asleep in my class, children coming into school unwashed, children wearing unwashed uniform for days and sometimes weeks on end, report cards left at the bottom of school bags, unopened and unread, and of course, hunger. When I was in my first year of teaching in Clydesdale, I had a prize box in my classroom filled with some sweets and some toys to recognise particular achievements. I recall one day after playtime, a child coming up to tell me that another child had snuck into the classroom during playtime and had stolen something from the prize box. When I spoke to that child about what had happened, it transpired that he had taken a bag of Haribo from the box. When I asked him why he had done that, he in his own words told me that he was absolutely starving. On speaking to that child further, I learned that this wasn't the first time they had done this, and that he and his 2 siblings would have turns about getting a play snack every other day. Conference, that was my introduction to the desperate and dire implications of food poverty, but it certainly wouldn't be the last time I would encounter them. In my final year of teaching before taking the leap into local government, I recall taking a group of boys to a football festival in Carluke. As I took the register, I heard one child's stomachs rumble, a noise, quite frankly, Conference, that has never left me. When I asked that child if he had had any breakfast that morning, he told me that he hadn't, and he said, and I quote, "All I had was a can of Diet Cola for my dinner last night. That's all that my mum had in." Conference, these are the children and these are the faces behind the poverty-related attainment gap, the attainment gap that continues to plague not only our education system, but wider society. We don't need academic research to affirm the correlation between food poverty and attainment, nor do we need it to highlight the social and emotional implications. It is self-explanatory and it is a lived experience for far too many young people in our country. And whilst the SNP quite rightly pledged to close the poverty-related attainment gap, it is little wonder that a government fixated on ideological and societal division made little inroads. If we are to truly eradicate the poverty-related attainment gap, we have to address poverty at its core, its underlying roots and its manifestations, and we have to remove the barriers that so many of our young people find in their way. To achieve this, we need transformative societal change, and to achieve that, we need a government that can deliver it, moulded on the values of compassion, fairness and equality, with a policy agenda labour-focused on delivering social justice for each and every individual in this country. Conference, that is the Labour Party and that is the Labour cooperative and trade union movement. I'm cautious of time, so I'll come to a brief close. Conference, I'll leave you with the crux of this for myself and Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse. Universal free school meals is more than getting food into our young people's bellies. It's more than removing stigmas. It's more than curricular attainment. It's about removing a barrier to let our children live the life that they want to make their own positive contribution to society and to leave the footprint in this world that they want to. Conference, I welcome the statement from the SSE on behalf of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and I'll second the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for an excellent speech. Now, the floor is now open for delegates who want to speak to any of the 3 motions. So please stick your hand up if you want to speak. And so I think Joe, and then there's 2 ladies at the back, and then this gentleman. I think, yeah. Go for it, Joe. Don't be shy.
Chair, Conference, Joanna Baxter, member of the National Executive Committee, Scottish Executive Committee, and standing to be the next Labour MP for Paisley and Renfrewshire South. Conference, you might have thought that in the middle of a cost of living crisis, when 410,000 adults across Scotland are suffering in-work poverty and 24% of children in Scotland are living in absolute poverty, you might have thought that our government would have been focused on bringing down energy prices, making work pay, might have done something about growing our economy rather than leading us into a recession. But no. Instead of trying to address the real issues that people face, people struggling to make ends meet, the Tory solution is to pop a tax on your working rights. Because on the 29th of January, they snuck out this consultation. A consultation to reintroduce employment tribunal fees. Employment tribunal fees that they first introduced in 2013. Fees which resulted in a dramatic fall in the number of cases being heard at tribunal. Not because they were vexatious claims, as the Tories might have you believe, because funnily enough, employment tribunals already have the powers to strike out vexatious claims. The fall in the number of claims was because the cost put people off challenging employers who acted unlawfully. According to the Supreme Court, those fees themselves amounted to an unlawful interference in people's rights to access justice. The cost prevented people from accessing justice. They were ultimately found to be unlawful in a legal challenge spearheaded by Unison. Now the Tories will tell you that their recent proposals are different, but funnily enough, Conference, the fundamentals remain the same. You would have to pay to access justice. Their own impact assessment, which accompanies the consultation, estimates that there's likely to be a 20% reduction in the number of claims being brought as a result of the fees being introduced. Those that have money to pay the fees will be able to access justice, and those that don't, won't. Those with less will suffer most again. Employers who act unlawfully will go unchallenged, and workers will continue to be exploited. I campaigned against the introduction of fees in 2013, and I'll fight against them now, because, Conference, there is no point having rights at work unless you can enforce them. There's only one party that will fight for people's rights at work, and that's the Labour Party. The clue is in the name, and you need to vote Labour if we're going to be able to strengthen those rights at work. Thank you.
Conference, Gregor Poynton, Labour candidate for the Livingston constituency. Conference, for over a decade now, we have seen what a Tory government means for workers, whether they live in Livingston, Liverpool or Llandudno. Low pay, insecurity, a downward spiral of workers' rights, leading to an economy going backwards. And where does that leave us? Right now, 1 in 4 children living in West Lothian are living with poverty. 1 in 4. That's mums and dads going hungry so they can feed their kids. It's schools providing the very basics, clothing and support for their pupils. It's food banks supporting public sector workers because their paychecks don't stretch to the end of the month. But we know there's a different way, a Labour way, where work pays, communities, business and government work hand in hand to lift people out of poverty and create prosperous, thriving futures for all of us. Everyone deserves a job they can live on and build a life on. We all deserve high-quality, secure, rewarding work. Our ambition is to ensure a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. It's core to our Labour values. That's why Labour in Power will deliver a new deal for working people. We will break the cycle of low pay, forcing people to take 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table, end the scourge of fire and rehire, scrap qualifying periods, which leave working people waiting for up to 2 years for basic protections and rights. Because we know that boosting working people's income is not only just good for them, but it's the right thing for our economy too. And it goes some way to tackle the cost of living crisis. In the past week, I visited an engineering and plant hire firm in Broxburn. The fabrication work the company undertakes is skilled and well-paid work. The company wants to take on more apprentices and skilled staff, but the owners are fearful for the future. Workers and businesses fearful of the future. That's the impact of this Tory low-wage, low-investment, low-productivity cycle that the country has been trapped in for the past decade. And what have the SNP done in this decade of Tory decline? At every turn, they prefer to pick a petty political fight to try and score a few points to aid their campaign to break up the UK, rather than work together with businesses and workers to build that stronger economy that will improve living standards and ensure we can invest in our public services. The SNP's approach leaves the country poorer, weaker, and drains the optimism for the future. Conference, we need a fresh start. At the next election, only the Labour Party can boot out the Tories and get our country back on track. Security in work, fairness in the workplace, an end to the race to the bottom. A cast-iron commitment to the workers' rights the Labour Party and the unions have fought for over a century. The futures are ours for the taking. Let's come together and build a better future for Scotland. And it all starts with working people earning a fair wage for a day's work. Thank you.
Good afternoon, conference. First time speaker. My name is Cecilia O'Loan. I am the chair of Glasgow Shettleston CLP. I'm also a proud Glasgow City Councillor and cooperative member. I proudly represent the Calton ward in the Glasgow East End that I also live in, and where child poverty sits at 49%. So half the children in my ward live in poverty. The levels of child poverty across Scotland is appalling, and I want to keep this realistic and somewhat personal. So what is child poverty? Poverty means you're poor, and poor means you have limited access to money. Lack of money means that you're struggling to buy food, to feed the kids, to pay for gas and electricity. You're struggling to pay childcare. It means no holidays, no Friday night or weekend treats, and you're possibly facing spiralling debt that you've got into to maybe pay for Christmas or pay for necessities. This not only affects families that are not working but in work poverty, which is a major issue. And we need radical approaches to help working families. Many people on low-paid employment find themselves in a situation they are literally just a couple of pounds over the threshold to receive clothing grants, school meals, housing benefit, council benefits. This is wrong, and we need to take action now. I also work for a children's charity in the East End of Glasgow, and COVID was horrific. We had so many people looking for help that we started a food bank. 1 week in, and we opened the doors, and we had 300 people standing outside. Absolutely overwhelming. But a lot of those people were working families, families who have such a low income, they can't save. They don't have money put away for a rainy day, because every day is the rainy day. That's how fragile their economy is. We've now had to develop a school uniform bank as so many low-income working families don't get clothing grant. But they want to be proud of their children. They want to send their children to school looking good and not being different from others. Just yesterday, the SNP and the Glasgow Council put up school meals. This will affect working families disproportionately. It will be a hit on them and many will suffer. That's why I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Chair, Conference, comrades, my name is Lynn Davis. I'm the Socialist Educational Society Secretary and first-time speaker. I'm here to support motion number 3. In 1997, as we celebrated with New Labour to Things Can Only Get Better, they actually really did, comrades. At that point, we lifted 1 million children out of poverty, and we also lifted pensioners out of poverty and helped working households. The goal at that particular point was to eradicate poverty by 2020, but sadly, that didn't materialise due to the change of policy priorities by a callous, cruel, out of touch, out of time Tory government, who sadly believe that poverty is the fault of the individual rather than identifying the social issues that's actually prevalent in our society. We must intervene as the Labour Party and finish the job that we started, and that is to eradicate poverty and eradicate child poverty. As our colleagues have stated already, 1 in 4 children are living in poverty in Scotland. However, like my friend and my sister says previously, in her constituency it's half. That means if you had to turn round right now and look at this area, half of the individuals, if we filled them with children up and down her constituency, half of this area would actually have children that are living below the threshold and are living in poverty. But what does it mean? And what harm does it do to our children? Firstly, it means children going hungry. Hungry in our schools and hungry in our communities. It means attending schools without suitable clothing. It means living in damp homes. It means feeling alienated or being bullied by their peers because they don't have the same as everybody else. It means watching parents making difficult decisions every single day and having to choose between heating and eating or having to turn up at a food bank just in order to feed their kids. This is fundamentally wrong in our society. Comrades, it also means not having birthday presents. It also means not having a birthday cake. And anybody that's a parent or is a grandparent, can you imagine the children in your life not getting up to a £1 birthday cake just because families cannot afford it? Because that £1 is actually unachievable for families living below that breadline. It means that children have maybe very few presents at Christmas, if any. And if they do have presents, it's because of charitable donations from people like us. And can you imagine whenever children go back to school and they say, "What did Santa bring you?" And they're maybe sitting there in silence because all of their friends, all of their peers have got loads of presents and they've hardly got anything. And can you imagine that 5-year-old or that 6-year-old saying, what have I done? Have I been bad? Is that the reason that I don't have a present this year? There's
Can I ask
9,000...
you to wind up now, please? Thank you.
So poverty is entwined throughout all their social issues. It leads to health inequalities, educational inequalities, food, fuel poverty. And let us ensure that no child is left behind. Let's ensure that we get that Labour's New Deal. Let's end in-work poverty. Let's have that real living wage, the fair pay agreement in social care, and strengthen workers' rights. And remember, comrades, poverty takes away choice. Poverty takes away hope. Poverty takes away aspiration. And let us give our children their hope back. And I implore you, conference, please support this motion.
Conference, Wilma Brown, Unison, also Kirkcaldy CLP and PPC for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath. Thank you. I didn't intend to get up here and speak today, but child poverty is a huge issue in my constituency. In one area alone, a very, very poor area in Kirkcaldy, there are 3 out of 4 children living in poverty. And what struck me most to get up and speak today was that before I stood as a candidate for the election, I used to be the chair, voluntary chair, of the Cottage Family Centre in Kirkcaldy. And we give help to children in all sorts of backgrounds, but usually it's some kind of alcohol or drug abuse or physical and sometimes mental abuse as well. And we give these children therapy, but when they come in, that's usually not the only story, and we get all of these stories. In the area with 3 out of 4 children who live in poverty, we had a call from the school there that takes in a very affluent area of Kirkcaldy and the very poor area. And the reason we had a call was they wanted to know about our ongoing project called the Big House Project. And what we do in the Big House Project is that we repurpose surplus goods that come in from all different kinds of companies. And they knew that we did toiletries and clothing, bedding, all of that kind of stuff. So they came to ask us to come and help. And when our manager went to find out what the problem was, the most bizarre, terrible thing was told that it's not the children who have asked for things that they need, but actually the affluent parents were coming to the school to tell the teachers that they didn't want their child sitting beside the smelly child, because these children didn't have parents that were able to buy soap powder or put the washing machine on, or indeed if they even had a washing machine. So we've had to put a worker into an area to give them repurposed goods that will help them to get their children's clothes washed. We've given them new clothes, we've bought shoes. There was instances of children sharing shoes to go to school, so some would go to school, some would stay at home. We've had children sharing coats. And their parents are choosing between eating, heating, clothing, washing. So there are many, many other reasons why children are living in poverty. And when we dug a bit deeper, these are not children on benefits either. Some are on benefits. But most of these children are in families of what we now call the working poor. A terrible scourge on our environments, in our communities, in our constituencies. So please support the motion. And I don't think the motion should be called child poverty. It should be called eradicating child poverty. Thank you.
And our last speaker is Dina. And I would say to delegates, please look up the Big House Project. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, my name is Dina Tissera, a member of the Scottish Executive and councillor from Aberdeen City Council. I am proud to stand at conference to support this motion. When we enter politics, we do so on the basis that we want to bring about change for people we all represent. So, conference, Labour must deliver for working people. We must be the party of change. At Aberdeen City Council, we have an SNP administration who love to talk about poverty. They love to set up people's assemblies, and they love to listen to the sound of their own voices. But the one thing that they don't do is deliver for working people and for those most in need. Conference, the last Labour administration at Aberdeen delivered for working people. After all, we delivered real change. 2,000 council homes, £1 million to help with fuel poverty, £20 million for capital projects in our regeneration areas, and of course, real action to support families with the Tory SNP cost of living crisis. Conference, I have never been as optimistic as I am right now, that change is around the corner. Labour can and will deliver change. Our change will be meaningful change. We will deliver for people, for working people, and we will not be obsessing over the Constitution, but we will be bringing forward real plans for the working people. Conference, under Keir, we got our priorities right. Under Rachel, we got our finances right. And in Scotland, under Anas, we got our competence back. And under Jackie, we got our voice back. Conference, let me finish with this. The change we need to deliver for working people is a Labour government at Westminster. And the change, that delivery of that starts now. Conference, I support Composite Motion 3. Thank you.
So thank you, Conference. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Kirsty McNeill, who is our prospective parliamentary candidate for Midlothian. And she's also one of my favourite candidates, I have to say.
I'm still alive, but I don't know how. You might think that's the sort of thing that someone would say after an earthquake or a tsunami. Instead, it's something that someone said to a mum said to a charity who'd helped her get through another year of this cost of living crisis. And you know, she might not know how she made it, but I do. She made it through the kindness of strangers. She and her kids are still able to eat because people chip in, even though they're facing tough times themselves. And thank God they do. Now, you'll know these people, right? These are the people who share whatever they have. The folk who chap on neighbours' doors when it snows. The kind of people who volunteer at a community group to make others' loads a wee bit lighter. They are the best of us, and we can never thank them enough. But there won't be a single person in this hall who isn't boiling with rage that folk with very little are having to hold up folk with even less. That strong, proud, dignified, hard-working people are having to depend on charities to get what should be theirs by right. That here, in one of the richest countries in the world, we have 1 million children who are either cold or hungry or homeless or who can't get the soap and toothpaste and washing powder on which their dignity depends. And that is what 14 years of Tory governments get you. And friends, we face the nightmare of another 5 years of a Tory government. And you know there's only one thing that can stop it, a Labour government. And in Midlothian, we are working night and day to hear the magic words Labour gain. And we need to hear it again and again and again across Scotland. With your help, we can boot the Tories out and we can keep the Tories out. But you know, the SNP, it's not much better. And I don't know about you, but I am sick to death of hearing excuses from the Scottish Government instead of a plan. You know, all of us, with any role at any level in the last Labour government, we woke up every morning and we went to bed every night thinking about just one thing, and that was how to make things better, easier, safer for people at the sharp end of life. We lifted 1 million children out of poverty because that's who we are, that's what we do, that's what Labour governments are for. And that is what has brought me back to politics after several years supporting children and families in our communities. And you know, I wasn't actually looking for another job. I love my job, but I know there is nothing I can do in my job in a children's charity that will ever make as big a difference as Labour in government does. So I will take precisely 0 lectures from Scottish ministers who've overseen the situation that 9,000 Scottish kids are stranded in temporary accommodation. I know there's some people, they'll tell you it's just the way things are. But we know this is not inevitable. It's intolerable, it's indefensible, it's immoral. And there's not a single person here, not a single person in the Labour Party, not a single person of good conscience across these islands that is going to stand for it anymore. That's why we have already announced that a UK Labour government led by Keir Starmer will initiate a root and branch review of universal credit so it works for working people. And you can bet, you heard it earlier, that any Scottish government led by Anas Sarwar will put ending child poverty and spreading opportunity at the heart of every single choice that it makes. You've heard today about our plan for Scotland and what we'll do to bring the change Scotland needs, about our personal debt strategy to help get Scottish families out of debt, announced by Paul earlier, and about our plans to end 0 hours contracts and the scandal of fire and rehire with our new deal for working people. You'll have heard it. You'll have heard the claim that there are no great causes left. But making work pay is a cause worth fighting for. Rebuilding our public services is a cause worth fighting for. Ending child poverty is a cause worth fighting for. So, in the long, hard days of campaigning to come, I want you to think of just one thing. Remember that mum who doesn't know how she's made it through the last year. Remember her. Fight for her. Get out and fight like lives depend on it, because they do.
So thank you, Kirsty, and I'm sure you're going to make an absolutely fantastic MP. Absolutely fantastic. So, Conference, I now want to go through the 3 motions, or the 2 motions in the SEC statement, and vote on them just by a simple vote of hands at the first stage. So, first up is composite motion 3 on child poverty. Are we in favour of that? Very good. Anyone against? That's good. We're in the right conference then, okay. Composite 4 is on a new deal for working people, and this is also recommended by the SEC, I should say. Are people in favour of this? Put your hands up, please. Anyone against? Okay, good. And then the third thing we have to vote on is the SEC statement on free school meals. Are those that are in favour of the SEC statement, could you please raise your hands? And is there anyone against? Okay, excellent. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce Ros Foyer to the podium. And I also have to thank her for her patience, because we're running a little bit behind schedule, but we'll get there.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, delegates, and I'm delighted to be here today to represent the Scottish TUC and to bring greetings to your conference from our General Council and from right across Scotland's trade union movement. And I think, as this afternoon's debate has shown, since I addressed this conference last year, life has continued to become increasingly difficult for our members, and we've seen them continue to suffer the consequences of the biggest fall in living standards since records began. But we've also seen our movement, the trade union movement, continue to fight back. We've seen workers in schools, colleges, universities, councils, on our railways and buses, and right across the private sector, who have all taken the very difficult decision to go on strike, just to get a decent pay rise on the table. And conference, let me say this, while it's an absolute scandal that already struggling workers and struggling families have to take on the prospect of strike action to protect their pay, the fact remains that taking strike action does work. It's never easy to take industrial action for the workers involved. It takes courage and it takes sacrifice. And I want to pay tribute to every single worker across Scotland that has taken action to defend their pay, defend their services and defend their communities, because that is what they were doing. And I also want to say that standing shoulder to shoulder with workers in struggle, like Anis Sarwar and many other people in this room have done, showing solidarity right across our labour movement, that brings results. In the last 18 months, STUC research has shown that workers in Scotland have won more than £4 billion of additional pay through industrial action. That's £4 billion that the bosses, the government ministers claimed wasn't available, money that wouldn't have been put in the pockets of working people had unionised workers not acted collectively and fought back. These figures demonstrate that right across Scotland, trade unions have been the most progressive force for wealth redistribution and closing the gender pay gap. And that is exactly why those terrified, tainted and increasingly toxic Tories are trying to attack our very right to strike. And how has our movement responded? Well, just last month, when the railway bosses threatened to use the anti-strike laws and implement a minimum service level for train drivers, union members stood strong and called for 4 more days of industrial action and forced the employer to back down. That is worker power. And yes, new legislation is needed, but in a country that already has some of the toughest barriers against taking lawful industrial action, ordinary working people need laws that work for us, not against us. And that's why we welcome Labour's New Deal for working people. It stands in stark contrast to the Tory government approach, and I welcome Angela Rayner's important commitment to implement the New Deal within the first 100 days of a UK Labour government. Because we urgently need a government that will take immediate action on banning zero-hours contracts, giving employment rights to workers from day one, and repealing this Tory government's pernicious anti-strike laws. The New Deal is going to be the biggest expansion of workers' rights in a generation, and it can't come a moment too soon for our members. But as crucial as that New Deal is, I also want to see an incoming Labour government devolving employment law to Scotland, in line with the calls from the STUC, from this Scottish Labour Party, and as of this year, from the TUC. So devolution of employment law has long been the settled will of Scotland's workers. It is now the settled will of the UK's workers as well. And we've seen this Tory government do all they can to undermine devolution. So now I say it's the right time for UK Labour to renew its commitment to being the party of devolution and to set out a strong vision for strengthening that devolution settlement here in Scotland. And I want to give our strong commitment that the STUC stands ready to positively engage in that conversation. Conference, as well as attacking workers' rights, as well as undermining devolution, we have for too long watched the Tory government consistently attack and brutally damage our public services. Their latest budget for the bosses was true to form. In the autumn statement, they were faced with the choice of investing badly needed investment in our public services or giving tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the rich. Well, you guessed it, they chose the latter. And that does have profound implications for Scotland's budget and for Scotland's public services. The STUC has been arguing that we need to start using the full powers of the Scottish Parliament to deliver tax reforms, the majority of which focus on wealth and property. And if implemented, our proposed package could raise £3.7 billion of additional funds each year at Scottish level. However, while the UK government might wield the axe, the Scottish government has been all too ready to sharpen the blade with its council tax freeze. Its decision to freeze council tax has made a bad problem much, much worse. The freeze has been universally condemned by trade unions, by local government leaders, by anti-poverty organisations, by most of the media in Scotland, and by several leading Scottish think tanks, and still they plough on with a disastrous policy. It is a measure which will hit vital local services, doing irreparable damage to those very communities that are most in need. And we can't keep going down a path where council tax is so broken that our politicians actively go out of their way to avoid fixing it. We really do need to up our game. This issue is far too important. Our local services, crucial services for those who are on low incomes, must be fully funded. We need less property wealth. We need more community wealth. We should be aspiring to improve our public services, to have more libraries and leisure facilities, new and upgraded schools, publicly owned bus services. We actually need to rebuild our public services, not just try and fill in the cracks that have appeared after years and years of austerity and neglect. Our people need real change, and our politicians need to govern with real vision. In Wales, a property revaluation is already underway. It is time for Scotland to follow suit and implement a full revaluation, and that action, sadly, is 30 years overdue. So let's see some action on that front. And whilst it might be easier or more beneficial at the ballot box for politicians to call for lower taxes on the one hand, but more investment in public services on the other, we've got to be honest with the people that we represent. We can't have Scandinavian quality public services and American levels of taxation. It just doesn't add up, and people are not stupid. So we welcome Labour's commitment to taxing non-DOMs and investing that money in our NHS. But we would also urge Labour at Scottish and UK level to look at what more can be done as we move forward, to tax wealth and to ensure that that wealth is really redistributed towards rebuilding world-class public services that we can all be proud of. Public services support our communities, but they also protect them. Fixing our public services is absolutely vital for the future, and that's a future that depends on us tackling the climate crisis too. Taking the right action to tackle climate change can bring down energy prices. It can create thousands of good quality unionised green jobs. It can regenerate post-industrial areas. It can help to democratise our economy. But be under no illusions, that's got a cost. We need billions of pounds of upfront public investment to achieve those goals. Trade unions were the first to welcome UK Labour's commitment to invest £28 billion a year in our future green economy. So obviously we're not going to hide our disappointment that this pledge has been redefined. Conference, there are few things that are more powerful and inspiring for me than the vision of organised workers and a Labour government working hand in hand for a greener and fairer future. whether it be greening Grangemouth, onshoring renewable energy trains, retrofitting our homes, or improving public transport. There are hundreds of projects which would reduce emissions, create good, high-quality jobs and improve people's lives. Crucially too, as well as being good for the environment and good for our communities, investment now would pay for itself many times over in terms of economic growth. So I say, work with us, work with our trade unions to make sure that a future UK Labour government delivers the investment needed to transform our economy and ensures a just transition for workers right across Scotland. Finally, conference, I can't stand here before you in a week that has seen the most unspeakable horrors playing out in the so-called safe zone of Rafah in Gaza and not speak about Palestine. Tomorrow, thousands of ordinary people will be marching in this city, and they will be marching across the world, calling for a ceasefire. The trade union movement unequivocally supports this call. We will not remain silent while genocide is taking place before our very eyes. To stand with Palestine is to be human. It is to stand with the 12,000 plus children who have been needlessly killed. It is to stand for justice and peace. Harold Wilson once said, "The Labour Party is a moral crusade or it is nothing." And I want to thank Anis Sarwar and all the other delegates to this conference who've stuck by that principle and who will call for a ceasefire. Conference, in summing up, let me finish on this. Our movement, the trade union and labour movement, is a broad church. We've got many varied views and we're no short in airing them. But in the period ahead, we need to focus on the values that unite us. Nothing should galvanise us more than defeating this Tory government. It is a government that is rotten to the core. It has no interest in anything beyond supporting its rich friends in high places and deciding who its next scapegoat might be. And we fully intend to support that goal to kick the Tories out of power in the next general election. Because we understand that it's only through a UK Labour government that we can rid this country of Tory rule that is so badly damaging our society to its very core. We understand that it is only through a UK Labour government that we can reverse the tide of attacks on working class people that 14 years of Tory rule has wrought. And that it is only through a UK Labour government that we can hope to see the levels of investment that we so desperately need to rebuild Scotland's public services and tackle climate change. And we know well that it is only through ridding ourselves of the Tories and ensuring the case is won within our own labour movement that we can deliver a new UK foreign policy which is not complicit in genocide and which supports a free Palestine. So in the coming months, it is absolutely vital that we all work together, that we all work hard, and that we do not rest in our endeavours to ensure that the next government in Westminster is a Labour government, but not just any Labour government, one that is absolutely and unequivocally on the side of working class people. Thank you, Conference.
So thank you for that, Ros, and we look forward to working with you in the coming weeks and months to get the Tories out of Downing Street, I can assure you. So, conference, we spoke a lot today about the need for us to work harder and harder in the coming year to make sure we do get Keir Starmer elected as our Prime Minister. And this next section of the conference is about celebrating the contribution of members, both in recent times, and I know many have been members for far longer than I have as well. But I think it's right that we start with a minute's silence for all those members that have passed away since our last conference. Thank you. Thank you, Conference. So I'm now delighted to welcome our General Secretary, John Paul McHugh, to the stage to present the Keir Hardie Awards. Can I invite those who have been nominated for an award to join us on stage as I call out each award? So the first award is for Outstanding Campaign. And I'm not sure how much of a surprise the winning campaign will be. It's for Michael Shanks MP and the Rutherglen Hamilton West campaign. I think so this campaign in Rutherglen Hamilton West saw Scottish Labour doubling its parliamentary representation at Westminster from 1 to 2, with a phenomenal result with a swing of 20.4%. Michael Shanks won the seat from the SNP and showed that Scottish Labour is ready to deliver the change people need. And I think it also showed people in England that we will contribute to that UK government. And the next award is for Social Media Campaigner, and the winner is Chris Roherty. Chris was a vital member of the digital campaign in Rutherglen and Hamilton West. Chris was instrumental in delivering a successful digital plan that reached voters across the constituency and helped us win the seat. You've changed, Chris. And I'm sure we will learn from Chris's experience there in future campaigns. And the next award is for community engagement, and that goes to Dunfermline CLP. Graham Downey and the Dunfermline CLP have been running a campaign to save a local GP practice in Dunfermline and throughout the constituency of Dunfermline and Dollar. Working with local communities, they have been champions for the people of Dunfermline. So this next award is for Membership, Engagement and Development. And excuse my pronunciation, it goes to Na Helene Ann Lar CLP. Hopefully that was okay. Despite being a constituency the length of the distance between Manchester and London, the CLP has run an incredibly strong and localised campaign so far. It says so far here. Along with their fantastic candidate, Torquil Crichton. And the next award is Workplace Engagement and Working with Trade Unions, and it goes to USDAW. USDAW is one of Britain's largest trade unions, representing almost 500,000 members in retail and warehousing and distribution. Their ongoing national campaign to support shop workers is putting pressure on the Tory government to take urgent action needed to save our shops. And the next award is CLP of the Year, and it goes to Amman Valley. Since Gregor Poynton was selected as candidate in Bathgale and Lithgow 2 months ago, they have hit the ground running with over 3,000 leaflets delivered thus far, and one of the highest contact rates in Scotland. So I'm also delighted to announce that Kirsty McNeill and the Midlothian team were awarded the Best Practice Award for their membership mobilisation at the UK conference in October. They were unable to receive it at that point, so today is the day. So well done to everybody. One, it feels like quite a few people there went home with their award, which is always good to see. And no doubt, hopefully, if you didn't get an award, you're thinking about how you can get your hands on one of these next year, after what's going to be a huge year for us. So, after being behind for quite a bit, and I won't blame our leader, of course, for overrunning, we're now just about to close events for today. But what I just want to remind you of a few things is I would encourage you to go to the fringe events starting at 5 o'clock to support these important groups. I think it's really important that we do that, and the stewards will be there to help you find the location of the room. I know this place is a bit of a maze at times. And also this evening, SJN are sponsoring a welcome reception at 7 p.m. in the Castle Suite. There you go. Glasgow doesn't have a castle, but it has a castle suite inside a hotel in the Crown Plaza. But you have to note that you should enter via the main entrance. Have a great evening, and I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you.